Good afternoon, everybody. It's lunchtime on a Thursday. That means it's time for Towers Take Live, brought to you by Marco's Pizza. Welcome back. Glad you're here. We missed you last week. Was getting a little bit of off time. Both Mike Griffith and myself have been trying to squeeze in a little off time here and there after the long regular football season and the SEC championship. Now we know the outcome of the year. Georgia 11-2, ranked number 5, falls short of the college football playoff, and will now play a 9-4, number 15 ranked Texas team in the All-State Sugar Bowl. That happens on January 1st at 8:45 p.m. So hopefully you can stay up with us on that night. I'm going to be really interested, as you know, as always. Towers Take Live, brought to you by Marco's Pizza, is a interactive medium. So I'm going to be looking at your comments on Facebook while we have our discussion here. And so I'd love to get your questions, see what it is that's on your mind at this moment. I see Matt Melendez says hi, and what you got for us today. We'll get to that in a minute. Raymond Cox is here. Tom Gilbert, Derek Tillman wants to talk a little recruiting. I will talk some recruiting with you, though. As we all know, Jeff Sentell is the expert on that. Let's see. Neil Adams hopes the Dogs play with a chip on the shoulder against Texas. That's going to be interesting to see how they arrive at that game. Hello, Eric Moody, Devin Cayley. There's a lot of you guys here. That's fantastic. Thanks. I'm glad you're here. Like I said, sorry we missed next week. I don't think we're going to need to miss again between the holidays and bowl travel and everything else. I think we're going to be able to get the rest of the Towers takes in for the rest of the year. Carlos D. Williams, unleash hell on Texas. Hey, I'm excited, personally, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. A couple of things I'm really interested in. I'll get to your questions. Now, you got to get to my questions first, right? It's my show. I'm interested in a couple of things. One, I'm interested in seeing how many people are planning on going to New Orleans, because this is interesting. Georgia making a return trip. Normally, Georgia wouldn't be going to New Orleans twice in 1 year. But the fan base is very loyal fan base, spent a lot of money. Are you going back? Is anybody going back? Did anybody go last time for the LSU game? Is going back? Bill Bittman, I see you. Bill Bittman says, dang, I need pizza now. And as you know, you can get pizza now while we're sitting here doing the show, man. Just, grab your smartphone, go to marcos.com. You can order a pizza while you're listening to me and answering questions. They'll have one to you before the show is over. I bet you. Give it a shot. Their pizzas are fantastic. And you can always get two-topping medium pizzas for just $6.99 each. So it's the deal of the century. It really is. I'm not kidding about that. They're very gracious to provide that for DawgNation listeners. So be sure and do that. Horns down, Eric Moody says. Brandy Hennessy, go Dogs. This will be my first bowl game and first trip to NOLA. Wow. You must be young. Are you, Brandy? Are you a young person? What do you qualify as young, right? I feel like I'm young, but really I'm not, right? But no, there's a group. So my wife is going back with me. She has a group of friends that made the trip to LSU. They're all going back, which I found is interesting. And I heard some remarks late from Greg McGarity earlier today on 680 The Fan, saying that Georgia's ticket sales were going good. Now, he's not going to say anything different most of the time, but I'd like to see how many people have actually gotten their tickets or plan on going. Let's see about that. And then, that Georgia's, as several people alluded here, Brandy's 36. Well, Miss Brandy, that's young in my book, and you look infinitely younger than that. And that's cool that you're getting to go. New Orleans is a fantastic place. It's a place that has great history with Georgia people. It goes way beyond Bourbon Street. People like me who've been going there off and on a lot over the years. Everybody has kind of their favorite haunts, their places they like to go. It's the food that drives me when I go there. It's fantastic. And I have, there's 3 or 4 places that I just absolutely have to get by to. Let me catch a couple questions here real quick, and then I'll move back to my narrative. Ryan Swabley wants to know, is Notori Johnson still practicing with the D-line, or is he going to go back to O-line? He is most definitely still with the D-line. He was practicing with him now, from a clerical standpoint. Let's talk about what Georgia's doing. Now, they have not practiced since the SEC championship game. Georgia's just coming out of exams. I believe yesterday was the end of final exams. Friday is graduation for people who completed their matriculation requirements by this semester. So there'll be several seniors walking on Friday. Georgia will begin practice on Friday. That's closed to the media, no access for interviews. Saturday, they'll practice some, closed to the media, no access. Monday will be Sugar Bowl Media Day. We'll get a chance to hear from Kirby Smart and some selected players on that day. And then we'll get a chance to go and talk to some players and go out and see some practice. Hello, Christopher Moore. How old am I? Richard Smith wants to know. How old do you think I am? Let's get some guesses on here. No matter how old you think I am, in my heart and in my mind, I'm much, much younger. Daniel Taylor and Terry Locklear say haven't fared so well in Louisiana. That's not necessarily the case. Georgia's had some great success in New Orleans over the years. Its greatest success, you could say. Certainly, there were some heartbreakers after that national championship win in January 1st, 1981. But Georgia's had some great success in Louisiana, whether it be against LSU or in the SEC championship game. Derek, yes, Zeus, a.k.a. Zamir White, I would imagine is very close to 100% right now. Probably not all the way there. I mean, you're not going to see it. We'll check and see if he's practicing. Now, we have not seen him on the practice field with the running backs all year long. And I have a feeling we won't see that in the getting ready for the bowl game. But I would imagine the goal for Zamir White is to get him ready to go next spring, to be able to go for spring practice. Jack Stanley says he feels sorry for Texas. This is interesting because obviously Texas being a 9-4 team, Georgia's a significant favorite in this game, and I think they should be. Been a lot of comparisons to when Alabama played Utah in 2008, I think it was, in the Sugar Bowl and got beat. But that was kind of different. Kirby talked about that. That was a very experienced Alabama team that was very obviously disappointed to lose to Florida in the SEC championship game. Utah was undefeated, who they played, and beat them in the Sugar Bowl. This Texas team under Coach Tom Herman still has some weaknesses that Coach Herman is trying to fill in. Thank you, Timothy Nelson says, after the SEC championship, I look 99 years old. I felt like 99 years old after that game. That was exhausting. Thank you, Trip. Davidson got it right, says he's 29 and holding. If you saw our good friend, Georgia legend, Buck Bellew, I believe his birthday was today. And he and his wife, Kelly, always celebrate by putting 39 candles on his cake, which he did again this year. But you can do the math from the 1980 game. He's a little bit older than 39, but Buck holds up well. David Wiley Jr. says if Texas, a revenge game, if Texas had beaten OU, we'd be in the playoffs. Also, we can prove how much better we are than them. Yeah, it's going to be there's some interesting matchups here. I do, and you'll be able to read about this at DawgNation as we break it down a little bit further as we go, get ready for the Sugar Bowl between now and departure. The team arrives on December 27th, and Mike Griffith and I will be arriving when the team does, as always, so that we're on top of everything they are. But they they are a strong offensive. It's typical of the Big 12. Now they're one of the better defensive teams in the Big 12. They hung their hat on defense in a lot of ways this year, and they're not quite as prolific as some of those Big 12 offenses are, but they're very, very good. Got a great receiver, a great running back, and a good quarterback in Sam Ellinger. Young guy, throws it around pretty good, and runs. No way. Mike Mizell says always, almost the big 60. I don't know if he's talking about him or he's talking about me. I'll never admit that, getting close to 60. It's still 10-9 in Texas. A lot of people say, tell me if you know what that means. Tell me if you know what it means. That what time is it? It's 10-9 in Texas. Tell me if you know what that means. What do we need to get to? Okay, so practice starts. Look, and recruiting. I know a lot of you guys want to talk recruiting, and I'm happy to talk some recruiting. This is really pretty fascinating. Georgia's recruiting under Kirby Smart is fascinating way. But what they're doing in recruiting under Kirby Smart has been just positively fascinating to watch. Now, everybody knows that I think Alabama cannot be unseated possibly as the number one team based on the 24/7 composite. They're signing more players in Georgia, though. I'm not counting out how many players Georgia will sign just yet. I will say that it appears that there's probably going to have to be some attrition. That's right. Brandon Vernon got it right. 1983 Cotton Bowl score. We better beat a team with a guy named Little Jordan. Yeah, but Little Jordan's pretty doggone good. He's a good kick returner too, referring to the wide receiver for UT. Everybody's got it. Georgia beat Texas 10-9. Rick Martin, UGA beat UT 10-9. Can you call them UT around here? I'm not sure that you can. Drew Miller says, "Get the chip off your shoulder, Chip. You aren't old, but you do tower over people like Brandon Adams." Yeah, right. Brandon Adams, he is the man when it comes to this medium, isn't he? He is absolutely a rock star when it comes to discussing his beloved Bulldogs. Mike and I come at it in a little bit different direction. We're not going to sit here and claim to be an unobjective fan. We're going to be objective about things, but completely objectively speaking, I think Georgia should be able to handle this game against Texas, and I think it's important. Especially if you're going to sit there and grouse about not being in the college football playoff, you better comport yourself well when you're playing in the consolation game, which happens to be the Sugar Bowl. And Texas is one of those great rivals. Not rivals, but great programs. For me, growing up in the 70s in Atlanta, I actually played for it was the North Decatur Rec Department's. We had a Longhorn team in 1970, I think it was, and we went undefeated that year. Won one game 62-0. I remember that for some reason. My father, Ray Towers, was the coach, and we had a lot of great players there. And so back in that day, I actually had my room painted orange and white. I had 2 orange walls and 2 white walls because I was so proud to be a member of the Longhorns. Hey, Daniel Taylor or Terry Locklear, whichever one you are, with your shared Facebook account, says BA is 41. Chip must be 82. Seriously, you gonna say that? Come on now. But yeah, so I've always hoped Georgia would play Texas. Now they've got them for a home and home as well in the late 2020s, I guess it is. I just hope I'm still around, talking of age, to cover them when they do that. Heck, I'm still waiting for the Texas A&M game, not the one here next year, but the one in College Station, Texas. Now, I have had the good fortune of going out to College Station since they've been in the league and covering a Georgia basketball game there. So I've been on the campus in College Station. It's a beautiful campus. It's a neat campus. A beautiful campus to be. It is beautiful. It's just big and expansive, like everything else in Texas. and they have a lot of huge buildings and great facilities and a lot of money out there. Um, and that's very, very evident. Um, yeah, Mike, I like that. Let's go with that one. That sounds like a good number. Um, so from a recruiting standpoint, going back to that, I know you guys love to talk about it. And look, I'm not the expert. I spent last night. Jeff Sentell was driving on the highway out. I can't remember if he was coming from or going to Montgomery, where they have an all-star game out there. Just getting the lowdown from him on everything that's going on. But Georgia has a chance, and until they don't, I have no reason uh, to count out Kirby Smart when it comes to his closing ability in recruiting. What was the name of that movie? Glengarry Glen Ross, right? You remember that movie with Alec Baldwin? Um, Recruiting is for closers, and I'm not sure there's a better closer in college football at this moment in time than Kirby Smart. We've seen that in his first three recruiting classes, and there's evidence that that is taking place. Again this year, we'll see Georgia closing down hard on some 5 stars. Obviously, they got Clay Webb. One of the first times ever that Georgia landed a 5-star out of Alabama that both Alabama and Auburn were hard after. The Jaden Hazelwood drama just never ends. But I give Georgia um, a really good shot at Jaden Hazelwood for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, obviously he's committed to Georgia to begin with. He has the longest, deepest relationship with Georgia and all its coaches. I can't tell you a whole lot of details into why he decided to open up his recruiting again after being committed since he was a sophomore. But a lot. It also has to do with the other teams that Hazelwood is considering. When you look at Florida State and Miami and some of those other programs that he's considering, I just think Tennessee, Georgia is just at a different place, a different arc of the program, and I would think that's got to be appealing. Then you got these guys like Nakobe Dean. I could really see Georgia's got some good linebackers committed, but the way Georgia's situation is an inside linebacker. If I'm a 5-star linebacker somewhere looking to come in and make an impact, by golly, I would definitely be looking at Georgia. A lot of questions here about the defensive coordinator situation. I'm like everybody else. I like Derek Ansley. I think he makes a lot of sense. A couple of different things on that. I don't think, based on my experience and everything I've seen from Kirby so far, this is not coming from Kirby. Certainly, he'll be asked about it on Monday. I don't think he's in a big hurry to name a defensive coordinator. I would imagine he has a very, very, very strong idea of what he wants to do with that position, because after all, this was no surprise that Mel Tucker moved. So you got to be planning for those kind of things. But there's a lot of options. So my understanding is that 2 members of Georgia's support staff have been snapped up by Mel Tucker. Jay Johnson, the quarterback, de facto quarterback coach. I mean, he's an analyst, but works a lot with Georgia's quarterbacks. I understand he's going out there to join Mel Tucker. And then the latest thing we're hearing is Tyson Summers, which makes a whole lot of sense. He's on Georgia's staff as a defensive analyst. He was head coach at Georgia Southern. Before that, he was defensive coordinator for Mike Bobo at Colorado State. So he knows the landscape out there in Colorado. So that would make a lot of sense. I have not independently verified that just yet, and I will. I'm just, on this defensive coordinator situation, I just don't see it being a priority right now for Kirby Smart. It's a priority overall, but right now they've got Bakari Rambo on the road recruiting, and that's where all their focus is. I'm sure it's where Kirby is. And if you watch on social media and see where all he and his coaches have been, they've been in Mercedes-Benz Stadium at championship games. They're showing up at championship games in Mississippi and Alabama and all over the place. Philip Jordan Wells, a very loyal listener, reader, and podcast participant, says Ansley would be his preference. Great recruiter and schemer. I actually don't know that much about his scheming ability. And generally, it's tough. And so the thing about Ansley, and this is a dynamic I don't know, to get him to come back from the NFL where he's a defensive backfield coach, you would probably need to make him a coordinator. Um, and I don't know whether he's ready to be a coordinator or or if Georgia would be willing to do that. Kirby could have somebody else in mind. He'd be fantastic in any way, shape, and form you could get him on the team, and I would imagine Kirby would do that if he needed to. In the meantime, in terms of bowl prep, I mean, I think between Kirby and Schumann, the capable analyst and defensive support staff that Georgia has, I think they could hold it together and get the bowl game plan in quite sufficiently without having a defensive coordinator. So those things tend to happen after the new year, after the bowl. If you go back and look over the years, whether it be Grantham leaving and replacing him or what have you, it tends to be after the bowl games. But yeah, Eric Moody, I agreed with you. Ansley would improve recruiting probably, and would be an unbelievable addition to your staff. We'll hear some more from Kirby about that probably on Monday. Carl Carr thinks that Brandon Adams will be the new DC, and I would imagine Brandon's probably sent his resume in. I would not be all surprised about that. That's kind of an interesting thing on this is it's always hundreds of resumes go in when there's a position opening like this on a staff like Georgia's, and you actually have to mill through all that before you can get to the people that you want. But I think Ansley makes great sense. There's some other people out there too. Think about Chris Rumpf, who's at Tennessee now. I can't remember what position he's got. He was traditionally a defensive line coach. I think he may be a co-coordinator with Kevin Shearer over there. Several other guys. But I would definitely look in that Alabama pool of coaches because, a lot of these people are floating around stuff. They work with Manny Diaz, took a job as a head coach, but his name was floating up. Dave Aranda, who makes $2 million a year, highest paid DC, old chief, what's his name? Those guys, bringing in new systems, Chad Thomas Black says, what about Shearer? He's a guy that you could see coming back. I'm not sure what his relationship is with Kirby. Kirby obviously didn't keep him on his original staff. Van Gorder. Eric Moody says Van Gorder. Anyone? That's somebody I definitely don't think of. That's a guy I just really can't understand. He was so good at Georgia, and it really struggled everywhere else he's been since then. He has landed on the staff again. Thank you, Brandon Vernon, for. I always know him as Chief John Chavis is who he's saying. I don't see Georgia, going out and getting a guy that's going to bring in his own system. You're right. Trip Davidson points out that Glenn Schumann has been to Kirby what Kirby was to Saban during his time, and Kirby could go that direction as well because obviously he's still hands-on involved very much with the defense, day-to-day operation. He is on the offense too, just not to the extent he is on defense. And I could see Schumann doing that as well. What I'm not sure, Schumann, I would imagine, could transition to coach secondary, or you could bring somebody in just to coach secondary. There are a lot of other people we don't know about. Johnson Michael, no, I do not think this will be a distraction for Georgia heading into the Sugar Bowl. I don't think there's any distractions for Georgia on the Sugar Bowl. I'm a little different than some of these other people. I know Georgia's disappointed about not making the college football playoff, but I think you're in the Sugar Bowl. This is not like you're in the Independence Bowl, the Weed Eater Bowl, whatever you want to call it. This is a major New Year's Day 6 Bowl. We've only got about a minute left here, so keep getting your questions in. Willie Martinez, Derek Tillman says, no, I don't think this will be a distraction for Georgia at all. They have a lot to play for. This is, in fact, the first game of the 2019 season. I think Georgia is going to be one of the favorites to to be national champion in 2019. Now they're going to have to go through Alabama again. Alabama is not going away. I'm going to have some stuff up later about recruiting in Alabama that underscores the fact that Alabama's not. The narrative is that was a team with much more seniority going into the SEC championship game, and they're losing a lot off their team. It's not necessarily the case. They're pretty young too, though Georgia is the youngest. Hey, before we sign off, and we only got about a minute here, I did want to make sure you know, and I do want to hear back from you quickly. Zeus is doing great, Carl. Carr. Georgia plays Arizona State Saturday evening in basketball, 6 o'clock. Arizona State is ranked 20th in the country. They're 7-1. They have a great player. I know I'm going to butcher his name. Dort. Lugwentz Dort from Montreal, Quebec, averages 22 points a freshman, is a great player. Let me know if you're going to go to the basketball game. It was interesting. I talked to Tom Crean earlier this morning, who's hoping, he wants a sellout crowd. I doubt that'll happen with exams just finishing and the teams, the students all leaving and heading heading home for the holidays. But let me know if you're going to go. I think you should go. It should be a good game. Georgia's got a lot to prove. This is a top 25 opponent, and Georgia hasn't fared well when they've met good teams so far this year, as the Georgia State, Clemson outcomes, Temple loss. Sonny Jester's going. Good, Sonny. I haven't seen our good friend Jesse Sweaterman Kinney on here, but I know Jesse Kinney will be there doing his jumping jacks in the 8th row, middle section. But that game's at 6 o'clock on Saturday night. Try to go if you'll be there. I'll be there and covering it and writing some advanced material on it. And this program is pretty fascinating. I actually had a great conversation today. I talked to Hugh Durham, called me out of the blue. Believe it or not, Hugh Durham calls me kind of on the regular, and most of the time it's to talk football. He's still a huge Georgia football fan. And funny thing real quick, I know we got to wrap up here. I'm getting the warning signals from the studio. We got to wrap it up here. But so much so is Hugh Durham a Georgia football fan. He can't even watch the games. I asked him if he watched the SEC championship. He said no. He didn't even watch the Auburn game. He said the rest of the family all watched it. They were in Savannah. He went up and he had on the Hallmark channel because he said he gets too nervous watching the football team. He wants them to win. He's the same way with Florida State. So that's interesting. So we're gonna wrap it up. If you have any other questions, I'll try to get to them. You last few people, I know I wasn't able to answer all of them. I'll have a Towers take up later today, weighing in on Georgia Alabama battle, maybe a little bit on the college football playoff. I agree with you, Carr, wholeheartedly. I've always been a proponent of the 8-team model. I'm not sure if it's going to happen. There's some logistics that make that a difficulty, but I do think it's something that college football needs to do. So I'm going to wrap up here. Again, I want to thank Marcos, who makes terrific pizzas. As you know, you can get fresh made dough, original sauce, 3 signature cheeses, and 2 medium 2-topping pizzas every day at marcos.com for $6.99. Tell them DawgNation sent you. Tell them Towers Take sent you. Thank them for sponsoring this program. Thank you for the guys back in the studio. Lawson Davis throws in this question real quick. Anybody leaving early? There's always somebody leaving early. Usually, Lawson. We'll see how that goes. Right now, all those kids are in the assessment period, and Georgia's going to, based on what I'm seeing them signing and recruiting, there's going to have to be a little bit of attrition, whether it's guys turn pro or what. But anyway, Mike Mizell, we'll leave you with this thought. Mike Mizell says, all I know is we're the only team in the nation that can hang with Bama. And I think that's true, too. And so all you're going to be asked to do going forward is hang with Texas. And I think Georgia can do that. Be back next week for one more Towers Take before we head out to New Orleans. Mike Griffith is on vacation right now. He'll be back soon. We'll have some football and basketball coverage all the way through the weekend. So be sure to tune in to DawgNation for that. And, of course, keep your eye on your DawgNation app for notifications, because Jeff Sintel is all over the recruiting scene, and there's going to be some big news between now and National Signing Day on December 19th. So for all the guys in the studio, for Michael Carvel, Connor Riley, and everybody at DawgNation, thanks for hanging out with me, and we'll see you the same time next week. Bye, y'all.